News Talk 1400 KFRU is proud to present the KFRU Heritage Series. It's a one-hour perspective on the events and the people whose lives have contributed to the heritage of Boone County. Listen each Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The KFRU Heritage Series. From News Talk 1400 KFRU.
Well, on the Heritage Show today, we're going to talk about the community, maybe some memories about places in the community, but also talk about the MU football program and other things with John Mosley, who's our guest, and it's a pleasure to be able to meet him. I don't think we've ever met until we sit down to record this program, so it's nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, David.
People know the Mosley name. Now we should go ahead and get Joe out of the way here. We'll just give him his moment in the spotlight here, and then we'll forget him. You want to talk anything about Joe Mosley?
Joe's my older brother. I want to make that clear. Joe's 3 years older than I am. And I'm proud to claim Joe, actually.
Were there other family members? You have other brothers or sisters? See, I
no,
don't know your man.
No, I was the last one. I was an RH baby, RH factor baby, and they told him my parents they couldn't have any more children. So.
I see. Now you moved here in the late 50s. So let's go through a little bit of your family's connection with the community for a while. What brought your family to Columbia?
We moved up here from north of Mountain Grove, Missouri, for my father to attend veterinary school. And so he went 4 years here to veterinary school. When he graduated, we moved to Roswell, New Mexico for about a month. He went into partnership in a veterinary clinic down there. And we got down there, and he didn't like it very well down and missed home and all that. So within a month and a half or so, we moved back to Columbia, and my dad started working at the university vet clinic.
So how long did that last?
Let's see. He should have retired. He kept working there for a long time, and he stayed there until, gosh, I should know the date, and I'm sorry I don't, but sometime in the 80s, I would say.
He was a veteran of the war?
Yes, he was in the Navy during the war.
He was in the Navy in the war. So what was it like when you remember stories that he has told or that you've heard from your family about living conditions here, about what it was like in the late 50s here?
Well, I remember some of it, but it was different. There was the roads weren't anything like they are now. Stadium Boulevard wasn't there. What else was different? The population was totally different. Yeah. I remember 36,000 being on the sign for Columbia, and I can't remember whether that was when we moved to town in 1957 or in 1960 or when, but it was much smaller.
You said before we got started in the interview today that I think the crowd of students was so big that some students were having to sleep in the gymnasium, Rothwell.
Well, I heard this from my father. When he came back from the war. He came up here to go back to school, I believe, and at the real shortage of housing because of all the GIs coming back. And
this would have been the late 40s.
Yes, would have been the late 40s. I think it was right after the war, actually. And so he went back down to the farm, and then he came back up to attend veterinary school.
How about that? The community has changed quite a bit. Now, did you have any places that you remember? Like, which schools did you go to when you were growing up in Columbia?
Went to Lee School.
Yeah.
We lived... when we first moved to town, we lived on Rosemary for a year, and then we moved to Rollins Road. We lived right where GCB is now. So we were right in the middle of campus. So most of my childhood memories are from areas around campus.
The general classroom building, you moved where that? I mean, that's where you remember growing up?
Yes.
I can't remember.
Well, for 4 years anyway, when my dad was in veterinary school, we were there. Those were all houses there where the new law school, I still call it the new law school, and the alumni center.
The Carnahan Quadrangle in that area there? I mean, you're right around there, and where the business school is?
Yes. So I had classmates at Lee School that lived in those areas also.
How about that? That had to be a great place. I mean, you're right on campus.
Oh, it was. It was great. I remember when they put the fountains in, those first fountains in on that mall. And, of course, Campus Town races were in our front yard practically. And
what were the Campus Town races? Now, I think I've heard those.
I think they're still going. Yeah. That's a competition where you have a relay. You've got a cart and 5 runners, I think.
Were these married student housing, or was this
No,
regular
these
homes?
no,
I mean,
this was
homes.
these were rental properties. These
Yeah.
were privately owned rental properties.
I'm trying to think what other buildings have been around there long enough that they would have been there for quite some time, because that has changed so much. And see, I came to school here in the mid-'70s, and I have that would have been 20 years, almost 15
Yes.
years after that happened. I just can't imagine. I mean, many of us think back to the old times about where the Alumni Hall is now and where the Shack was and some of the
Yes.
jewelry store and a poster store and stuff like that. But, I mean, that's a block further south than that, and I just have no recollection of homes ever being there
Yes.
and any visits here.
Yeah, those were homes, and they were building the Commons. I think the year we moved out of there in 1962 is when my father graduated from veterinary school, and I believe what we call the Commons was under construction at that time.
What did it feel like? Was there when you went to school, and then when you went to junior high? Where'd you go to junior high? Jeff Junior.
Jeff Junior.
And then probably Hickman High School.
Correct.
So you went to all of those schools. Was there a feeling of one group would be parents connected to the university and one group townies, or was there ever any kind of separation that way?
I didn't feel that separation very much. You know, U-High was going then.
Yeah.
Over at the university. It was a much smaller school. I had friends that went there, however, but I didn't notice it so much then. It was a much smaller town then.
Was it as a young person? I'm thinking at 8 to 14 or so like that. Did you just have the run of the town?
Yes. Well, you did. I mean, in the summer there weren't programs. We all just kind of got together and played Indian ball, we called it, or something like that. But we were pretty much on our own.
Where was the playground? Where'd you play? On the campus?
On the campus. Oh, yeah. We used to, the university's baseball field nobody was there in the summer. That was a great place for us to play baseball. And then we lived right across from where, I guess the field there was... they used to play football there, where the swimming pool is and all
Yep,
that.
yep.
Rollins, I guess that's still called Rollins.
Yeah.
It was right there. So
What was it, Stan? Where Stankowski Field is now with its artificial turf and a track and everything like that? I know long time ago, way before us, there was that's where they played football, I believe, at the University of Missouri. But at that point in time, 60s into the 70s, what was there?
I think they used that for PE instruction at the university and different things like that. I'm trying to remember. I believe they were part of the grandstands for that stadium that were still there. It wasn't the full thing, but I think part of the grandstands
I think I
were
can
there.
remember some of that also.
And I remember when the swimming pool wasn't there yet when I was growing up there. And I believe it was just open space at that time.
We're talking with John Mosley. He's our guest on the Heritage Show, and we're just picking his brain about some of the memories of growing up in that time period. And you're talking late 50s, and then you would have been in high school in the late 60s to the early. Were there entertainment places that you remember going? What was the as a high schooler in the late 60s when certain things were happening nationally and certain things were happening on the campus? What was your connection like to those when you were a high schooler? Did you have much connection to that, or were you isolated and insulated from that?
We were connected to that, I believe. I mean, that was a time, you're about the same age, David. You remember it was during the Vietnam War, there were a lot of protests, and you're probably referring to the Kent State issue, and that was when I was a senior in college. And I remember there was a shooting on campus, matter of fact, but everyone was very much aware of that. It was a smaller town. The university was even more... it had a larger effect on the town, it seemed like, at that time. Of course, my father and mother were working at the university, and so I felt very connected to that. Entertainment places, there wasn't a whole lot for young people. There wasn't a whole lot anyway. I can remember when liquor by the drink was voted on in Columbia. I believe when we first moved to Columbia, there wasn't even liquor by the drink. There was the Stein Club and a few places like that. And I assume they just served beer. I don't know. I wasn't going in them. But there wasn't a whole lot of even restaurants or fine restaurants like we have now, or good restaurants.
We're dodging all around. People are saying, John Mosley, come on, you got to talk about his career at the University of Missouri and playing football, which we will. But I'm going to get to that in the segments that will follow this one, so that we can talk about that. But I'm curious as you got older, what has kept you in Columbia? What has kept you as part of this community, and where did you go for a while? And I know you told me you played some football in Hawaii, so we'll maybe hold on to that until we talk about your athletic career. But what's been the hold here for you for Central Missouri?
Well, I played a little professional football, and then I came back here and found opportunities here and worked here. Now I'm a ADA consultant, and I've had my own little consulting business for 20 years now, actually. And unfortunately, I have to travel quite a bit with that, go to Nashville and Sacramento. My wife is a veterinarian and has a practice here. And so I like Columbia. We all like Columbia. My family's here. Obviously, my brother, my mother still lives here. My father passed away in 2007, but that was a strong point in that.
ADA, Americans with Disability Act?
That's correct.
That's what you're talking about. So what kind of consulting do you do with that?
Well, it's usually with public entities. It was most of my work the last 10 years has been in metropolitan Nashville, and now I'm working with the Nashville school system. In Sacramento, it's with Caltrans, the California Transportation Department. But it's usually a governmental entity that runs into some trouble and needs some advice.
I want to say this, that I wish, and I probably could figure this out if I went back far enough, but we've talked on the Heritage Program with a wide variety of people, and we often ask for feedback, and we regularly get feedback. It was feedback from one of the listeners that said, needed to get John Mosley on, and I believe they called you, I'm not sure, but I think a raconteur or something like that. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what that meant. Somebody asked me when I showed it to him, and I talked to John Duncan, who is the producer of this show. I said, John Mosley, I know his career as a football player, but I'm not sure exactly what attracts this person to identify him this way. I don't know what they had in mind. You?
I don't either, and I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I'll take it as a compliment. I remember so Dave too. Rogers claimed that title. I believe it was part of his when he did the column in the paper.
Wasn't he something?
Yes, absolutely. So
I can't remember now how many years ago he's. He used to come on this show, and he used to come on Sunday mornings on KFRU, and things that we used to have. Some great memories with that. Well, I want to go ahead and I'm going to take the break a little bit early so we can come back and we can start in on talking about the football career of John Mosley. So that's what we're going to do next. Stay with us. This is the Heritage Show. As I said, we like feedback and we like a response, and so you can give that to me after you've had a chance to hear our programs or any other ideas for future shows at david.lyle@cumulus.com. This is the Heritage Show, and you're listening to News Talk 1400 KFRU.
This is the KFRU Heritage Series. More coming up on News Talk 1400 KFRU. This is the KFRU Heritage Series.
You're listening to the Heritage Show on News Talk 1400 KFRU, and you're listening to John Mosley, who is our guest this week, and we've talked to him about some of the family life, but many people will think of John Mosley. He's a member of the Missouri Intercollegiate Athletics Hall of Fame. He was on the All-America football team in 1973. I think part of that fame is that you were a walk-on that squad and achieved All-American status, and that, I don't know if it didn't happen much back then. I don't think it had ever happened at Mizzou, and it doesn't happen very often today. That's tough to do.
It is. I think they gave out, I was trying to remember before I came in here, I think every year, it's different now. You don't have as many players. When at that time we were talking about around the early 70s, people could stockpile players. I think we had 44 scholarships that we could give out each year, something like that.
How many did you have on the team? Because right now I think it varies from school to school, but you're talking, I think, 80 some or 90 scholarships.
And I think there's a limit on it.
Yeah,
it depended how many people stayed from my freshman class, and there were over 100 of us out. That was the fall of 1970, and the year before, Missouri had gone to the Orange Bowl, the 1969 Orange Bowl. I don't know whether that was a factor or not, but there were over 100 of us out there trying out, 44 who had scholarships.
Now, when you and you didn't have a scholarship as a freshman,
not at that time,
but when you were freshmen, were they allowed to play on the varsity team at that time?
No, we had our own freshman squad then.
So what was a freshman schedule like? How many games did you have in a given year?
I think you played 4 at that time. We played Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa State. Went up to Iowa State, and maybe some junior college. And oftentimes on Friday, if it was rainy or something, they didn't want to protect the field. We didn't have our games on the practice field.
Yeah.
But we didn't have a large schedule at all.
So then when did you practice with the, did they call it varsity? And what did they call it?
Yes, they did. And we practiced separately. We had our own practice.
Separately.
Coach Frela was our freshman coach. Saw a bunch of those guys. We had a 40th reunion of our 1972 team 2 weeks ago. Of Coach Fraley was there. Saw a bunch of guys. It was great.
So, talk about your experiences at Hickman on the athletic field. So, Hickman, did you play more sports than just football at Hickman?
I ran track and played football.
Who were some of the coaches at Hickman?
Coach Rourke, a longtime coach there, was the head coach. Coach Lee and Coach Whitesides were the coaches there. Coach McLeod, Jim McLeod, who was the basketball coach, was the sophomore coach. We had a sophomore team. Leo Lewis, senior. Actually, my sophomore year was an assistant coach also.
So I will talk football, but I'm a track guy too. What'd you run in track?
I ran the sprints. Ran the 100-yard dash, 200-yard dash, 880 relay. Ran a little bit of mile relay, but just in big events.
Did you get to go to the state track meet there?
Yes, I did. I had the state record, or had not state. I'm sorry. Let me back up. Although people probably won't remember, that's what I've.
You can go
when
ahead
you get
and claim
to be
it.
60,
Yeah,
you can
claim it.
Embellish a little bit. But no, I think it was tied for the 10 flat was the record for the 100-yard dash, and 21.9, I think, or something like that. But I tied a couple of people.
Some of the young people who are associated with the university now, I'll tell them, and they'll talk about track, and you got the nice track facility here at the University of Missouri, but I can remember state meets inside the stadium. The track was around the stadium at Memorial Stadium.
That's correct.
Outside championship meets, and that was terrific to be able to run inside that stadium there. But then the other thing is, you probably they had indoor state track meets.
Absolutely. I was just going to bring that up. And, of course, that was in Rothwell. Or Brewer Fieldhouse, at what it was. And we'd always heard that they ran out of money when they were building that. That's why that turn was so sharp down at I guess it would be the west end. And, of course, on the east end, you went underneath the stands.
Exactly, underneath the stands, and the surface was dirt.
It was. It's very dusty. I remember when we were freshmen, we practiced over there because it was raining. It was the only indoor facility we had. It was dusty as heck. And they were doing registration then. Coach Fraley said, "Now, everyone, you got to be quiet while you're in here."
Tell a bunch of high school guys are going to be quiet.
Yeah.
They're in practice. And the thing about it is, I think you sprinters would end underneath where you couldn't see. All you could hear is the pop, pop, pop of hitting the pads.
That's exactly right. I think that was a 60-yard dash, wasn't it then?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think that track was maybe, I'm trying to remember, it was maybe, I don't know, because I ran longer distances, but I can just remember, like, for the 880, the half mile, it was something like 6 laps. Or I mean, it was a lot of laps, maybe 8 laps. It might have been a 110-yard track. I don't know what it was, but you ran underneath the bleachers quite a few times. I mean, those are great memories, and people don't realize that track was there. I mean, and a dirt track to boot. Did you ever, as a high schooler, did you attend many basketball games at Brewer Fieldhouse? Were you all going to many games then?
I did, and we used to, again, live right across the street from there. When I was a little kid, we figured out a way to sneak in, actually.
Oh, no.
They had those metal... I'm not going to give my secrets
come
away,
on.
but we
It's not
figured
even
out how to
there
get in
anymore,
there.
so, I mean...
And during Christmas, we could get in and play basketball, and unless Harry Smith caught you, of course, and you didn't want that to happen.
So who was Harry Smith?
Harry Smith was a great football player, and then he was a football coach here. And then he was in the PE department at the University of Missouri for a long, long time. Harry is still around town, a great guy. I think he was on the 50-year All Rose Bowl team. He played at the University of Southern California. Great player, real old school coach too.
Now, how go back? I mean, nobody's sneaking into Brewer Fieldhouse to see games anymore, and it's the Mizzou Arena now. It's not going to work there anyway. So, how'd you sneak in as a kid?
Well, again, remember, I told you I tend to
Embellish.
embellish.
We don't care.
Maybe
Embellish.
that's what that racketeur means or something. But actually, we would get in there, though, during breaks and so forth. There was a lot of stuff you could do in there. And they had some metal. Sometimes they would have that window, those huge windows. I don't even remember, but they had huge windows. Mm-hmm. And they had some metal screens. Mm-hmm. And I was very valuable because I was very skinny. I could get through there and maybe push that window up and we'd all get in there. And then I'd go open the door. No one else could get through there. I'd go find a door to open.
And do you remember some of the names of the players that you were fans of and that you went to watch, even basketball at that time or football?
Not too much. I was pretty young then. I do remember the football. Certainly watching Gary Lane, Gus Otto,
Yeah.
guys like that. And before that, the 1960 team was undefeated and ranked number 1 and so forth. The Tobins played on those teams. A lot of great guys. I saw Max Moyer's son at this last football game, and I remember Mike Majak and those guys. I can name a lot of names, actually.
How many guys came from, well, let me go back to Hickman for just a second. For the Cupies in your high school career, how successful were they?
We were successful. Our senior year, my junior year, we were kind of a 50-50 team. My senior year, we were undefeated except losing to Jefferson City in the rain. It was a terrible thing. It was the only game we lost. My brother, when I was a freshman, so I still was at Jeff Junior, my brother was a senior in 1967. The 66 season is when they beat Jeff City. Jeff City had a 71-game winning streak at the time and beat them. Odon Logan was a great player on that team. I played with guys that played at the university.
I mean, that feeling, and that's predating Rockbridge. So, folks, you can't even figure Rockbridge into this, but it's Jefferson City, and that's still the main rival for Hickman. I mean, Rockbridge is a rival, but Jefferson City is the team that you really mark. Would you say that's still true?
I would say it's still true from sitting where I am and not being in school now, but I would assume that it is. Yes.
Was that just something, do you remember growing up? Was there this dislike of Jefferson City?
Yes.
I think you would feel it's kind of like the Mizzou-Kansas rivalry, maybe.
I think that's a good comparison. It really is. It goes way back.
How was it instilled into a young Columbia guy that Jefferson City is the main rival?
Well, even more so for someone that was wanting to play football. I made a big impression on me to be in Columbia, a town of somewhere around 40,000, and then you'd have 60,000 people at a football game, and it made an impression on me, and wanted to play football, and so the Jeff City thing was a obvious rivalry that, you didn't need much coaching for that, although all your coaches had played at Hickman and had a rivalry with Jeff City, and so they felt the same way as I do now, I guess.
John Mosley is our guest on the KFRU Heritage Show. He was All-American, and we'll get to some of the conversation about that as we work our way. So you have the success at football at Hickman. Who was the encourager? How did you get the idea, I'll walk on to MU?
Well, I had some offers, a few offers. I was pretty small. And Kirksville, Russ Sloan was the coach up there, and I offered me a scholarship, and I wanted to see if I could play at big-time school and try to go to
What was your position in high school?
I was a running back and defensive back. I played both ways when I was in high school.
So recruiting at that time is nothing like it is now. I'm not sure how the recruiting went out. They just had to know your name. Sometimes they'd probably send old 8mm film or something like that to somebody. You said you had some other offers. Did other schools give you at least some interest? I don't know.
They did. Northwest Missouri State, the state schools did. And then I sent my films to all the Big 8 schools at that time. I was thinking, boy, I'd love to come back. These guys aren't going to give me a scholarship. But anyway, Coach Clay Cooper really was my position coach, ended up at MU, and I didn't know he knew who I was. But evidently Coach Rourke had mentioned something to him. I really didn't have any encouragement from the university to walk on. And to tell you the truth, David, I don't really remember whether I think I had talked to I let them know that I was going to walk on. And after I got there, though, Coach Cooper took an interest in me, and that was really a big part of me making it.
Head coach at that time was?
When I came was Dan Devine. Dan Devine's last football season was 1970 here, and then he went to Green Bay, and then Coach Onofrio became coach.
Al Onofrio after that. So how successful was the team during the times that you played, the 3 years that you were on the Tigers?
Well, the first year was a terrible year. 71, we'd gone 5-6, I believe, and that was Coach Devine's last year. And then Coach Onofrio's first year was 1-10. The next year, 72, we started out. We won a couple games, then we lost a couple games, and then we went to Nebraska and got beat 62-0 up at Nebraska. The next week, we went to Notre Dame, which was ranked equally as high as Nebraska, and we upset them. That made all the difference. All of a sudden, you can't just think you're a good team. There has to be some experience of that. After we left that experience, we all of a sudden started playing like a good football team. We went to the Fiesta Bowl that year.
Was 62-0 is a pretty good drubbing. And you had to, I'm going to guess you bussed back from there probably. You weren't flying.
No,
we
flew.
You flew?
We flew. We had
How
a chartered
miserable would
Ozone.
that have bus ride been? That would have been horrible.
Well, it was a pretty quiet plane ride, but the next week, it was just 1 week later, we flew back from South Bend on a rainy day, and a bunch of people met us at the airport. Really a great feeling.
Let's talk about some of the players who were on the team with you. Let's talk some of them. Like quarterback, who was the quarterback?
Quarterback when I played was John Cherry, my junior and senior year. Let's see, my freshman and sophomore year, I think it was Chuck Roper and Mike Farmer from Jefferson City. Kind of went back and forth playing quarterback, and I think that hurt our offense a little bit. But
you were a defensive back.
That's correct.
And a punt returner.
Punt returner and kickoff returner. Yes.
What do you like about playing punt return and kick return? I mean, to me, that is one of the. There has to be more of an adrenaline rush for that than about anything else that happens on a football field.
There is what I liked about it. It's kind of like everything else. It's when you do well. It's very enjoyable.
That's how it is in everything.
And it's a little bit heightened in a situation like that because it is difficult and it is kind of an uphill battle or whatever. You're waiting for a punt and your Adam's apple is exposed and you're wondering what's going to happen.
Because you're looking up.
Oh yeah, yeah. And there's a time when I was fortunate enough to score some touchdowns, and there's a time during that return when that happens when you realize that's happening and. It is quite a rush.
It seems to me like that would be great because you don't. I understand there are return plays. You're going to return to the right, we're going to turn to the left, or up the middle, or something. And so people do have assignments, but it is more gut instinct than anything else. I mean, you may have a direction you're supposed to head, but that changes so quickly based on what's going on.
Well, it really does. And MU has a good returner now. And I think one of the keys to being a good returner is when you get that ball, you've got to move somewhere quickly. Everyone's lined up at you, and so you need to get away from where you are as quick as you can.
Did they do one back or two back deep?
I did one back at MU. I can't remember. We may have had two backs at Hickman, but we had a one back, yes.
Was it easier to do kickoffs or punt returns?
Well, I didn't really worry about the contact and the run so much. Returning punts, the thing I wanted to catch the ball. That was the scariest thing. They're kind of hard to catch. They're kicked, the wind, the sun. You get a left-footed kicker, it goes differently. I didn't want to drop the ball. After I caught the punt, man, it was home free after that. And a kickoff is much easier to catch. And they're not as close to you either. You've got a 20-yard cushion there.
So I'm reading this, and we need to set the scene. Okay, this is what it said. This is online, University of Missouri Intercollegiate Athletics, the Hall of Fame, and it's talking about John Mosley. It says you were inducted in the 1995 class. We can talk more about that in a few moments. One of the most exciting players ever to play at MU, Mosley holds the distinction of being the only MU athlete ever to go from walk-on to All-American, a defensive back from 1971 to 73. Mosley was a daring kick return man. He ranked 6th in the nation in punt returns in 1973 with an average of 16.5 yards per return, career average 13.3, still the school record. People don't have an understanding of, if you get 16 yards, that's a lot on a punt return. They're not doing that much anymore.
That's correct. I think they've changed the rules a little bit where you can't block below the waist. There's some rules on the blocking that does make it more difficult to get the returns now. But, I'm proud of that.
Was it just like you could just feel it and you got into a rhythm there of this happening and the confidence just keeps building and building?
Well, there was confidence. Had great blockers, of course, and I think that they had confidence in me as a return man, and I had confidence in them, and so that does have an effect. It really does.
So what was it that gave you the chance to go from a walk-on, one of 100 freshmen, and 44 of them had scholarships at the beginning, a walk-on to catch the attention of Clay Cooper and get to play, and plus, then all of a sudden become a star return man?
Well, Clay took an interest in me. I mean, that really helped. In spring ball, my freshman year, I was still a wide receiver. When freshman year, they gave you a choice. You pick what you want to play on offense and defense, and then they decide from there. I ended up playing receiver, broke my ankle. So in spring ball, I'm still 8-string receiver or something. I was the first freshman. Well, Clay would take me out of line when the receivers would be running against the defensive backs and have me cover some, and then he kept me there. And so he really saw something in me, and
they ask for volunteers for return men. I mean, sometimes I'm thinking that or they see something in the personality of a person and say, you know what, he's got the most guts and the most daring. We're going to stick him back there.
Well, I returned punts in high school, and I think they'd seen that. I got to know Clay very well after playing and so forth, and I didn't realize that he even knew who I was, but he did, and knew that I had some potential as a punt returner. I remember in junior high was the first time they sent me back to Dave Carlson was the coach at Tech Junior, and sent me back to return punts. I said, "Are you kidding me?" We were playing West Junior, and again, I wasn't really concerned about getting hurt. I was worried about catching the ball. That was the hard part for me.
Did you fair catch very often in college?
Not too much. Yeah. I think that's why that daring came up. I will say that, my senior year, that's when they put in the change about waving your hand. Up to my senior year of college, you could just stick your hand up. And I remember we were playing against K-State. I did call a couple of fair catches. I was very late on getting my hand up. And I remember Vince Gibson, the coach at K-State, commented on that, was pretty saying, hey, we got to change this. So I didn't call too many, but... I
don't think I can blame you for making that hand wave now that everybody's familiar with, huh?
Well, I may have been part of that.
We're doing the Heritage Show. We're going to take our final break. We'll come back for one more segment. Our guest is John Mosley, All-American, member of the Hall of Fame, Intercollegiate Missouri University Athletics. This is News Talk 1400 KFRU.
This is the KFRU Heritage Series. More coming up on News Talk 1400 KFRU. This is the KFRU Heritage Series.
Back for a final segment talking with John Mosley on our Heritage Show at News Talk 1400 KFRU. All right, so the coaches, we mentioned them just briefly. Some of the other players, what are some of the other guys that you remember that were on the Missouri team when you were playing back in the 71 through 73?
Well, when I was a freshman, that would have been 70, Mel Gray was still here. John Matusak, you may know that name.
I do know that name.
That's when he spent his half season here. He came here and then got kicked out of school halfway through the season for a fight, I believe. But that was interesting characters there. Tommy Riemann was a running back. It came into Missouri with great fanfare in my junior and senior year. Guys like Leroy Moss, I've already mentioned John Cherry, Dan McDonough, Scott Sodergren were the captains my junior year.
What's the feeling of carrying on? I mean, you know the players that played before you. I mean, Johnny Rowland would have been a guy that I remember growing up, and he would have been before you. Some of the guys that came after
Roger
you.
Worley.
I mean, there's just this stream of people. There is something that seems to me, and you could say this at any major college where there is a football team and a fan base. You have this responsibility in a way of just carrying on things that people before you, maybe more so than any other things. I mean, we can feel it at a radio station. You can feel it at any office and any business. But, a team, there's something there, isn't there?
Oh, there definitely is. And, of course, when you're a freshman, those senior guys are there, and you remember them, and you look up to them. And then when you get in that position, you're not wanting to let those guys down even. So it goes beyond just your own teammates even.
Do you keep much in touch with the game now? Are you a studier of football nowadays? Kind of
it's easy. It's easy to, back when I played, there weren't very many games on television. When you played on television, it was a big deal. With cable television, it's really changed in that respect. So it's pretty easy to keep up on what's going on. It's covered so well.
The reason I ask that is it more complicated now? I mean, were they still... You had a whole bevy of coaches back when you played, so position coaches, they broke it down. They knew what was going on. They scouted other teams. Do you think it's much different now, more complicated?
I think it's more complicated. It probably is. I know that the training is much more involved. Back when I played, I was from Columbia. I was the only one in town. During the summer, I was the only player in town. I had no one to work out with. Now, I'm not over there, but everybody stays. We didn't really even have much of a weight program when I played football. Really didn't. We had a universal gym during the off season. Coach Onofrio's sons were. I had a couple of guys. His sons that I played high school football, they went to Utah. They had weightlifting. They got me into weightlifting in the summer. I remember I used to lift weights with Ben Plunkett.
Yeah, he was a great discus thrower.
Yes, right. And those guys like that would use the free weights, and so I kind of hung around them. And
you're not near as big as he was.
No, and that's why I felt like I needed to do that. Yeah. I felt like I needed to work out. Now it's much more. You're going to work out. If you're a college athlete, you're going to be on a program. So the training is different and more complicated.
During the season, what was the demands on you? Did you feel like, to me nowadays, for right or wrong, and I'm not judging this, it's just the way it is, it's like it's a full-time job to be an athlete at a certain level at a certain school.
It is. And it does take a lot of time. Being from Columbia, when I'd go into the old Knowles or whatever, people wouldn't ask me, hey, how'd you do on that history exam? They'd seen. And so, when you're 18 to 21, you may think you know a lot, but, you really got a lot to learn.
So were you doing you weren't working out quite as much? I mean, like you said, you did on your own, but they weren't there. But now you've got team meetings that you have to go to. They study so much film or video or whatever it is, and then just the overall demands of time. It seems like they're there all the time at the training centers.
Oh, they really are. And you had an off-season program, where you did work out, and then you had spring ball, of course. And so it was all year round. We had study hall, but I don't believe you had to go to study hall unless your grade. You could, but I don't think you had to unless your grades got below a certain level.
Where was all that? A lot of people think of the Devine Center now for the indoor facility, and that I can't even know a name of what it is, but it's the area now where they've got computer labs, they've got the
Total Person, I think.
Yeah, and they got the workout room and the great weight facilities. Where did you all do that?
We didn't have anything like that, and it certainly wasn't over there. Over there was just a locker room. It was only for football. We didn't have weights over there or anything. I'm kind of embarrassed. It's kind of like not being able to tell your daughter when you go through your college where the library is. I can't remember where they had the study hall. I believe it was over in the Ag building. We had our meetings, the Ag building with no windows there. We used that for, I don't know whether they didn't fill it all up or it was the newest building on campus, but pretty sure that's where study hall was.
John Mosley is our guest again. We're talking about his days at the University of Missouri. I'm curious, so you had grass fields at that point in time. You remember one of the games where it was just a messy? Do you have any memory of a messy game?
Yeah, Kansas. My junior year was really nasty, really cold and wet.
Was that here or in Lawrence?
That was here. My junior year, and David James was throwing, and it was bad. We had some others though. Iowa State was prone to. We would go up there, and they had a grass field also, and we'd play them late in the year. That could be a really bad field.
Oh, it could be a frozen field.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
The people who came after you, for example, the ones like when you were a senior and you were looking back at freshmen or sophomores, who were some of the people who came after you?
I'd have to think. Well, Henry Marshall. Yeah. You would remember that name. Henry was, I can't remember if it was my junior or senior year. That was the first year that freshmen could play. Henry played a little bit as a freshman, and then he plays as a sophomore. Steve Pozarkowicz was the quarterback. Tony Galbraith. Yeah. Tony Galbraith came in the year after me. I know Tony. I've known him for a long time. Great guy. You'd certainly recognize that name. Who else? Joe Stewart was right around that era. I'm sorry.
Who were some of the names of the opponents that you remember, like a defensive back trying to guard somebody or trying to get a read on a quarterback?
When I was a sophomore, Colorado had Cliff Branch, who was very fast. Covered Johnny Rogers. Tinker Owens wasn't a great receiver. Steve Owens was a great receiver. Yeah. Let me back up. I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't want to say anything bad about anybody. Some of the other receivers, those stand out because of their speed and so forth.
So was it just rivalry? Was there any connection with these guys? Did you talk to people? What's it like out on the in between plays or after the game or before the game? Is it more of a we're in this as competitors, but we're doing it with the right attitude, or was it just I don't want to have anything to do with these guys?
We were competitors. After the game, I did talk to some people, particularly as you got to be older and you'd seen people in the past. I remember talking to the Oklahoma guys after the game my senior year. They were on probation and saying that wasn't fair to them and different things like that. But during the game, it was pretty serious, and I didn't anyway do a lot of talking.
Did you get away with things now that people couldn't do now, or do you think that the competitors are still doing the same things now as they used to?
They're probably still doing the same things. I have no way of knowing, but you can imagine under a pile. But you do get mad. You get mad. I mean, after the first hit, I was always try to run into somebody. As a defensive back, you couldn't always do that, but I always try to run into somebody the first deal so I'd kind of get my mind right that, hey, these guys, they don't want me to do well. They're against me. I mean, it seems simple, but that does go through your mind.
What would be a display of showboating in the early 70s, and how does it compare with showboating now?
Well, I remember Greg Pruitt, when we were playing my junior year down in Oklahoma, he ran, he scored a touchdown, and he backed in the last 10 yards. And that is showboating. It made everybody mad. The play was called back on a penalty, too, which was kind of justice to that.
But the penalty wasn't for doing what he did, which could be a penalty now in some situations.
It was not.
There was no spiking the ball or anything like that? Or was there?
The spiking the ball had just started. No one really spiked the ball at that time, but I don't think if you would have spiked it when I was playing, it would have necessarily been called because it was so new. But, now delay of game, certainly.
You seem to have the same attitude, and you seem to have the same, you look good. I mean, you could go out and put that uniform on today. You could go out and play as TJ Moe and be number 28 if they need somebody to come and play for him.
I tell everybody I can't make grades. I might have some, even if I had eligibility. But I've also had both my hips replaced.
Oh, well.
And so I asked my surgeon, Dr. Beckett, if I could resume my punt return career. He said, as long as you don't get tackled, it'll be fine. So,
well, that's what the point was, not to get tackled.
That's right.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. We're out of time. We don't have a chance to talk about playing pro ball in Hawaii, although we save that for some other time, perhaps.
All right. Thank you, David.
Fun to talk to you. Thanks for being our guest. That's the Heritage Show, and our guest has been John Mosley. If you'd like to respond, again, my email is david.lyle@cumulus.com. We'll have another Heritage Show next week. This is News Talk 1400 KFRU.
You've been listening to the KFRU Heritage Series, celebrating our history and heritage of Columbia and Boone County. Listen each Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. The KFRU Heritage Series. From News Talk 1400, KFRU, Columbia.